Today, we're going to try and make sense of one of the most horrifying cases in recent memory. A story about a father, a plan, and the 6 children who paid the ultimate price. It's a case that really makes you stop and question everything you think you know about being a parent.
And this quote, well, it just gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? Because for Mick Philpott, his children weren't really children, they were pawns. They were leverage. They were a means to an end. And understanding that, that's the key to understanding him.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth does a father get to a place where this seems like a good idea? In this explainer, we're going to peel back the layers. We're going to look at Mick Philpott through the lens of forensic psychology to try and answer that very question.
Okay, so let's set the scene. On the morning of May 11th, 2012, a fire absolutely tears through the Philpott family home in Derby, England. But here's the thing. This was no accident. The fire was set on purpose as part of a really twisted plan. And the outcome, it was just catastrophic.
Six children died from smoke inhalation. 10-year-old Jade, 9-year-old John, 7-year-old Jack, 6-year-old Jesse, 5-year-old Jaden, and their 13-year-old half-brother Dwayne. 6 lives just gone, wiped out by a plot that their own father dreamed up.
To really get our heads around how this could happen, we have to shift from the what to the why. We need to get inside Mick Philpott's head, and the way to do that is through a pretty specific clinical diagnosis.
A forensic psychologist who examined the case diagnosed Philpott with antisocial personality disorder, or ASPD. You've probably heard it called psychopathy. Now, this isn't just some label we're throwing around. It's a real clinical framework for a life spent manipulating people and just not caring about their rights. This is the lens we're going to use for the rest of our analysis.
So let's break that down. What did ASPD actually look like for Mick Philpott? Well, we see 4 key things again and again throughout his life. This constant need to manipulate and control everyone, a shocking history of violence, 0 empathy or remorse, and this massive, grandiose narcissism. These were the building blocks of who he was, and they all led right to that fire.
And you have to understand, this behavior didn't just pop up out of nowhere. This was a consistent pattern of cruelty and control that went back decades, long before that fatal night.
Just look at this timeline. It's absolutely terrifying. Back in 1978, he stabbed his teenage girlfriend and her mom over and over again. And for that attempted murder, he served a little over 3 years. That incident basically set the stage for the rest of his life. He brutalized every single woman he was with. This wasn't a guy who just snapped. This was his normal.
You know, this quote from his very first victim, Kim Hill, it just says everything you need to know. You don't say no to Mick Philpott. For someone with his disorder, relationships aren't partnerships. They're about power. They're about total control. People were just possessions to him.
And he created this bizarre public image. He would go on national TV demanding a bigger house, painting himself as this poor, struggling family man. But the reality behind closed doors? It was pure exploitation. The man was unemployed, he lived off government benefits and the paychecks of both his wife and his mistress, who he literally called his bitches. It's textbook narcissism.
So this is where it all comes together. That narcissism, that bottomless need for control, the greed, the total lack of empathy, it all came to a head and created the perfect storm for this arson plot.
So what was the motive? It was this toxic cocktail of greed and revenge. See, his mistress, Lisa Willis, had finally had enough and left him. And when she left, she took her 5 children and, maybe more importantly to him, their benefit checks. The fire was his insane solution, a plan to frame Lisa, get the kids back by playing the hero, and finally get that bigger house he felt the world owed him.
The plan itself is it shows a complete break from reality. He truly believed he could pour gasoline in his own mail slot, set his house on fire with his children asleep inside, somehow control the inferno, rescue them, and come out looking like a hero. In his mind, those kids weren't people with hopes and fears. They were just props in his little drama to get sympathy and cash.
But of course, his mask eventually slipped. The police bugged his hotel room, and when he thought no one was listening, he finally let his guard down. But listen closely to that quote. He's not saying he's at fault for their deaths. He's angry that his perfect plan went so terribly wrong. That's a confession born from a shattered ego, not a broken heart.
So, that recording, plus all the forensic evidence, finally led to the arrests of Mick, his wife Miried,
and their buddy Paul Mosley. The whole thing finally went to court.
All three of them were found guilty of manslaughter. Mick Philpott got a life sentence with a minimum of 15 years. His wife Mairead and his accomplice Paul Mosley each got 17 years.
And this brings us right back to the beginning, full circle. The trial and the expert testimony just confirmed what his entire life story already showed us. Just as psychologist Glenn Wilson put it, Philpott's actions were textbook behavior for someone with severe antisocial personality disorder. This was a man who was just incapable of empathy, driven only by what he wanted in the moment.
And that just leaves us with one last, really chilling question to think about. Remember, Mick Philpott tried to murder 2 people in 1978 and was out of prison in just over 3 years. He was set loose, a man who had already proven he was capable of incredible violence, and he was free to hurt people for decades. So you have to ask yourself, was a tragedy like this always going to happen, or was it a failure of a system that just didn't see the monster that was right there in front of it?